In 2016, California wife and mother Sherry Papini disappeared for 22 days. When she was found, she told authorities a detailed account of being kidnapped and tortured. Years later, in a stunning twist, Papini pled guilty to making false statements about what happened to her, setting off a media firestorm. Now, for the first time, Sherry Papini is telling her side of the story and revealing shocking new information. Sherry Papini, Caught in a Lie, an ID documentary event, Monday, May 26th at 9 on ID. Set your DVR. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 305 of the True Crime All the Time podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing very well. I'm glad to hear that you're doing well. Also, we've got some really good episodes on tap this weekend. Obviously, during this one, we're finishing up part 2 on Chris Benoit.
Right.
We'll get into that in a minute. But on True Crime All the Time Unsolved, we have an episode out right now on Gareth Williams, and this is also a two-parter, so this is part 1.
Yeah, we're headed over to beautiful Great Britain, and we're going to dive into a little background of Gareth, and then we're going to go ahead and dive into the actual murder. It's very mysterious, and it involves some of those 3-letter acronym agencies.
Yeah, so I think this is one that people are really going to be fascinated by. So make sure you check that out. Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. Emily Andrews jumped down to her highest level.
Well, thank you, Emily.
Linda Sinclair.
Hey, Linda.
Raina Talabak.
What's going on, Raina?
Jarrell Luna.
Hey, Jarrell.
Kevin Rose.
Hey, what's up, Rose?
Angie Johnson.
There's Angie.
Mahek Sandhu.
What's going on, Sandu?
Teresa Schrock.
Hey, Teresa.
Sheila Torres.
What's up, Sheila?
Julie McKenna.
Hey, Julie.
Sarah Zartalamna.
Zatalama.
That's what I'm going with.
Yeah.
Sarah Brown.
That's a tough one, Sarah.
Tina Chang.
Hey, Tina.
Landon Heisey.
What's going on, Heisey?
Kathy.
Hey, Kathy.
Don Caton.
Appreciate that, Don.
Sierra Colson.
Hey, Sarah.
Tammy.
Well, gotta like it, Tammy.
Okay. Stacy Krogeris.
Well, thank you, Stacy.
Sabrina Stanberry.
Well, Sabrina like the witch. See, it's getting close to Halloween.
Oh, I see how you're making that connection.
Yeah.
Although you did just call one of our Patreon members a witch.
Well,
but,
she's a good witch.
Yeah. I didn't say that, Sabrina. That was Gibby. Kathy Rayburn Troba.
What's going on, Kathy?
Neurotic.
Well, what's up, Tick?
Sonia Power jumped out to her highest level.
Hey, appreciate that so much, Sonia.
And Karen Dahl did as well jump out to her highest level.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you, Karen.
So we appreciate that new support. And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Hannah Potts.
There's Hannah. Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, so love the continued support. We had one really great PayPal donation, and that was from Deanna Johnson.
There's Deanna coming through. Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you. All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time?
Man, I am ready.
So in part 1 of the Chris Benoit episodes, we discussed his early life. We talked a lot about his wrestling career, and we really got into kind of, his personal life, his marriages, although it seemed like Chris had everything. And it really did, right? The guy had money, he had fame, he had a beautiful family.
Yeah, it was all going his way.
It was. But at the same time, there's no doubt he was struggling with intense grief, which we talked about some of that.
Right.
Steroid abuse, and a very volatile relationship with his wife. So in part 2, we'll discuss the full investigation into the Benoit family tragedy. And I'll make the same disclaimer that I made in episode 1. This episode does discuss domestic abuse and suicide. So it was on June 26th that the Fayette County Sheriff's Office confirmed that Chris Benoit murdered his wife and son and that he hanged himself in the weight room of his home. According to the CBC, Sheriff Tommy Pope said in a news conference, "We are now looking at this case and ruling it as a double homicide suicide." So I think, Gibbs, at first glance, when the authorities walk in on a scene like that, I think that's a pretty natural determination to make.
Yeah, I don't think it's that difficult.
Now, we may dive into it because there are some people, I even heard from some after episode 1, that do not believe Chris Benoit killed anyone or took his own life.
Well, that is a rabbit hole we can certainly go down.
So police began putting together a full timeline of the weekend. The autopsy found that Nancy and Daniel were killed just hours apart. Nancy was killed on Friday, June 22nd, 2007. She was found wrapped in a towel in the home office. Her wrists and ankles were tied. Nancy had blood under her head, which indicated that there must have been, some type of struggle. According to DA Chris Ballard, Nancy had a bruise on the small of her back, as if someone put their knee on her, and she was strangled with a cord. A Bible was found near her body. Her official cause of death was asphyxiation. Daniel Benoit was killed in his bedroom on the morning of June 23rd. He was found in his bed with a Bible near his body. DA Chris Ballard told ABC that Daniel might have been put in a chokehold. His cause of death was also ruled as asphyxiation. Daniel was found with needle marks in his arm. Now, police initially thought he was being injected with human growth hormone because of his small size.
Such a very personal way to kill somebody.
Asphyxiation usually is, but especially, if this DA is right and Daniel was killed through the use of a chokehold, man, you talk about up close, personal, nasty. So the following is a more detailed timeline of the remainder of the weekend. As we talked about in part 1, on July 23rd, 2007, Chris Benoit was scheduled to appear at WWE SmackDown in Texas at 3:30 p.m. Chris's friend Chavo Guerrero received a voice message from Chris saying he missed his flight because he overslept and he would be late to the event. So Guerrero called him. Chris confirmed what he said in his voice message. According to Guerrero, he sounded tired and groggy. He also said that Chris told him he loved him on the phone, which he told a number of different papers was out of context.
You can always tell, right? When if a friend says something like that to you, they never say it to you before. It's definitely something awry.
Well, you and I have been friends for a long time.
Right.
If you called me on your way home and said, "You know what, man, I just want to tell you I love you."
Yeah.
I would think it's a little odd.
Yeah.
Just because it's not something that you and I say to each other a lot.
Well, I used to say it to you all the time, but you would never say it back.
Well, and it led to that restraining order, and then things got really messy. But I'm with you. If you've got a good friend,
right,
kind of what phrases they use, and really more importantly, what phrases do they not use?
Well, there you go.
Because that's what really sticks out.
Sure.
At 3:42, Guerrero called Chris again because, as he said, he was concerned about his behavior. Chris didn't answer. So Guerrero left a message saying, "Just call me back." Just 2 minutes later, Chris called Guerrero back and said he didn't answer because he was speaking with Delta, trying to change his flight. He said he had a stressful day because Nancy and Daniel were sick with food poisoning. So these two guys spoke about their travel plans for the WWE Tour of Texas. Chavo asked if he was okay, and Chris told him that he was really tired. But again, Chris sounded very, very groggy.
So after his wife and son were killed, he had a call with his friend and said that they were both sick.
Well, what are you going to say? you're either going to tell a lie or you're just going to try not to say anything at all.
Right.
Obviously, you can't tell the truth if that's what really happened. At 4:30, another coworker who often traveled with Chris called him from outside the Houston airport. Chris answered the phone and told this person that Nancy was vomiting blood and Daniel was also vomiting. He believed they had food poisoning. Chris said he changed his flight and would be in Houston at 6:30 p.m. He told the coworker to drive to the WWE event. So my first thought is, why are you saying anything at all? And the only thing that I can really come up with is that you're trying to set the stage for obviously what is going to, come later.
Right.
Maybe he's not sure what he's going to do at this point in time.
Sounds like maybe he was contemplating maybe turning himself in.
Maybe there were a lot of different things that was, running through his mind. At 5:35, Chris called WWE Talent Relations and told them that Daniel was vomiting and he and Nancy were at the hospital with him. He said he'd be taking a later flight, but would still make it to the event in Beaumont, Texas. At 6:10, a talent relations rep called Chris, and this rep asked him what time he'd be in Beaumont. Chris said he was leaving Atlanta at 9:20 Eastern and would get to Houston at 9:24 p.m. Central. The rep told him it would be too late to make it to the event. Chris apologized, told this person he had a family emergency. The rep told him that he should still fly to Houston and get ready for the Vengeance event the next day. So not only are you, telling people things about your wife and son that can't possibly be true, but it's almost as if you're trying to move forward and go to these events and make these events.
Right. It's like
very odd.
Trying to stay business as usual.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. At 6:13 p.m., the rep called Chris to reconfirm his travel plans. Chris didn't answer. So this rep told him to take his flight and rest before the Vengeance event the next day. So there's a series of phone calls here, right? Over kind of less than a 3-hour span. Then on Sunday, June 24th, several messages were sent from both Chris and Nancy's cell phones to coworkers. WWE did originally post the text messages, but then later removed them from their website. But the texts were retrieved by the New York Daily News. So Chris texted two coworkers that he spoke with on June 23rd. At 3:53 a.m., he sent the text message, CS, my physical address is 130 Green Meadow Lane, Fayetteville, Georgia, 30215. Almost immediately, he sent another text message to these two coworkers saying the dogs are in the enclosed pool area, garage side door is open. Nancy's cell phone texted these same two people. About a minute later, 3:54 a.m., CS, my physical address is 130 Green Meadow Lane, Fayetteville, Georgia, 30215. And then a minute later, Nancy's phone texted the same two people the exact same text message. At 3:58, Nancy's cell phone texted a coworker who often traveled with Chris. The same message. My address is 130 Green Meadow Lane, Fayetteville, Georgia, 30215.
So bizarre.
Well, essentially the same text message at least 4 times in the span of 5 minutes, some of them going to the same individuals multiple times and some going to different people. Let's not forget, it's like 3:50 something in the morning. I think you have to factor that in as well.
Right.
Who's texting at 3:58 in the morning?
Why are you just sending me your address?
Right. And where's the context? What does it mean? Be like, okay, that's nice. What else would you say?
Right.
So WWE attempted to contact Chris via phone, via text. They also called local hospitals in Atlanta. So obviously they were worried about him by this point in time. On June 24th, Chris Benoit hanged himself in his basement weight room. By 11 p.m. on the 24th, no one had heard from him. And what the authorities came to believe was that he sent all of these texts to help someone find the bodies before too much time had passed. And so that does make some sense, right? If you've already killed your wife and son and you're planning on ending your life, who's planning on coming over and can get in the house and will find you?
Right.
Could it be 3 days? Could it be a week? Could it be 2 weeks? And does it make sense that somebody would not want it to be an extended period of time?
Yeah, of course.
On June 25th at 12:30 p.m., WWE learned about the text messages that were sent out the day before. At 12:45 p.m., they contacted the Fayetteville County Sheriff's Office and asked for a welfare check. At 4 p.m., they received a call from the Sheriff's Office informing them that they had entered the Benoit residence and found 3 bodies, a man, a woman, and a child. According to an article from Wrestling Inc., posted on July 3rd, 2007, Chris's neighbor, Holly McFaig, was actually the one who found the bodies. We kind of talked about this briefly in episode 1. The Benoits had these dogs that were preventing the police from entering the house, but the dogs were familiar with her. So she was able to, get them under control, and they would allow her to enter the home. But she ran out screaming because she found Nancy and Daniel. McFaig's representative said she had to leave her home due to the massive media attention.
I can only imagine how much attention was there.
Well, Chris Benoit was a star in the world of wrestling.
Sure.
This was a big story. So you and I talk all the time about, okay, what would it be like to find a dead body? In this case, 2 dead bodies. It might haunt your dreams, right? For a very long time.
Sure.
Cause you a lot of mental anguish and problems. But here's the other side of this that we don't always see, because this is such a high profile case, because Chris Benoit was such a high profile person, everybody is going to descend on this house, on this neighborhood. They're going to hound this woman. They want to talk to her.
Yeah.
You don't always have that in every case in every city in America, or in the world for that matter. McFaig also reported seeing Chris on Saturday the 23rd and said that he told her that Nancy and Daniel were sick with food poisoning. So obviously this was something that he had come up with.
Yeah, his story.
It was a story he had come up with. I don't know how well thought out it was. I don't know where his head was at. I still don't know what he was planning on doing with that information or what that was going to ultimately set up. Investigators started looking into how steroid use might have contributed to the tragedy. I think it's pretty well known, right? Steroid abuse is linked to roid rage or outbursts of anger.
Yeah, it can be pretty violent.
The sheriff came out and confirmed that anabolic steroids and legal prescriptions were found in the home. They did not know at the time if Chris Benoit was using the steroids. Fox News reported that Lieutenant Tommy Pope from the sheriff's department said there was a lot of prescription medication that he had received from doctors with what we believe to be at this time legal prescriptions. And that word steroids can often be very misleading. Right? You can go to the doctor and the doctor can give you a steroid shot right in the office.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes, because steroids are very beneficial.
Yeah, I get them a few times a year.
Whether you need them or not.
Exactly.
You just walk in and say, hey,
hook me up.
Need them.
That's right.
I can't tell you why I need them. I just need them.
I just need it.
But obviously, when a lot of people think steroids, especially with this case or with, sports, you're thinking the anabolic steroids, the performance enhancing type of steroids. On June 26th, WWE released a statement saying that Chris Benoit tested negative for steroids on April 10th, 2007. And they added that the physical findings announced by the authorities indicate deliberation, not rage. So in my mind, there's a couple of things here. First of all, and we talked about it briefly in episode 1, they have to immediately distance themselves from Chris Benoit.
Oh, for sure.
And they did that, right? They had to walk some things back. They had to take some things off of their website. But here you have them putting out a statement, not only trying to distance themselves from Chris, but also distance themselves from the notion that their wrestlers are using performance enhancing steroids.
Right.
Because that's a big deal.
It is a huge deal.
According to ABC, Chris Benoit was tested in April as part of WWE's 2006 talent wellness program that included an aggressive substance abuse and drug testing policy. Now, steroid use was linked to several pro wrestler deaths before Chris. His close friend Eddie Guerrero died of heart failure in November 2005, and his death was linked to long-term steroid use.
Yeah, definitely some very bad side effects of steroids.
Yeah, I mean, let's go way beyond what they term roid rage,
right,
or the outbursts of anger. I think it's been scientifically proven that it can cause some really bad things within your body. And this is aside from, kind of the stereotypical stuff that people joke about, right? Make your grapes smaller and all that stuff. I'm talking about like real medical issues.
For sure.
Although nobody wants their grapes really to be smaller.
No, never. But you don't want them huge either.
I'll take your word on that. I don't know where you're coming from, what place you're coming from. Imagine having one extra day every week, more time to cook healthy meals, work on that novel, or just binge some good true crime documentaries. What would you do with your extra day every week? Well, now it's all possible with ClickUp, the productivity platform that'll save you one day a week on work, guaranteed. ClickUp began with the premise that productivity was broken. There were too many tools to keep track of. ClickUp is the one tool to house all your tasks, projects, docs, goals, spreadsheets, and more. ClickUp is built for teams from 1 to over 1,000, and it's packed with features and customization options that no other productivity tool has. So you can work the way you work best. Whether you're in project management, engineering, sales, marketing, or HR, ClickUp has easy-to-use solutions that create a more efficient work environment. Join the more than 800,000 highly productive teams using ClickUp today. Use code TCAT to get 15% off ClickUp's massive unlimited plan for a year, meaning you can start reclaiming your time for under $5 a month. Sign up today at clickup.com and use the code TCAT. Hurry, this offer ends soon. Don't let allergy season slow you down. Get common allergy meds for as little as $15 with GoodRx. So you and your family, pets included, can stop allergy symptoms before they start. GoodRx is free and easy to use. Just search for your prescription on the website or the app, compare prices, and get a free coupon to show your pharmacist. Save at over 70,000 local pharmacies nationwide, including Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Publix, Kroger, and many more. Check GoodRx before every trip to the pharmacy to save up to 80% on both brand and generic medications. And did you know GoodRx rewards you for saving money too? Join GoodRx Rewards today and earn points every time you use a coupon. Remember, GoodRx is not insurance, but works whether you have insurance or not. And it could be your insurance copay price. I've been using GoodRx for years, and I can't tell you how many times I have saved money even with my insurance. Stop allergies before they start and save big on allergy medications this season with GoodRx. Go to goodrx.com/TCAT. That's goodrx.com/TCATT. On June 27, 2007, Chris Benoit's personal physician, Dr. Phil Aston, told the Associated Press that he last saw Chris Benoit on June 22nd, 2007. So that wasn't very long, before all of this kind of took place. Just days. He said he prescribed Chris testosterone because he had low testosterone levels. According to Dr. Aston, Chris did not seem distressed. All right, testosterone is pretty common nowadays. I think a lot of men take that. No doubt, as you get older, your testosterone levels drop.
Sure.
It's just a fact.
Got to supplement it somehow.
But what I think is important here is him saying he didn't seem distressed. Now, you can make of that what you will. Maybe he wasn't distressed, on the 22nd.
Right.
Maybe that happened the next day on the 23rd. But that same day, Fayetteville County officials announced they were investigating a link between Chris Benoit and a company called MedX Life. MedX Life sold steroids online and was under investigation for illegal steroid sales. In June 2007, an official told CNN that Chris's name was on receipts indicating he had purchased anabolic steroids and human growth hormones from Signature Pharmacy in Orlando, Florida. And that company was under investigation for illegally selling steroids. On the 27th, WWE attorney Jerry McDevitt made the statement that Daniel Benoit had something called Fragile X syndrome and that his condition was taking a difficult toll on Chris and Nancy. And I'll be honest with you, Gibbs, this is something that I'd never heard of before. Fragile X syndrome. But when you look it up, it comes up as a genetic condition inherited from parents, which results in various developmental problems like intellectual disabilities and cognitive impairment. So it doesn't sound good.
No.
Sounds like it could have a lot of negative side effects, cause a lot of negative issues, but it's very rare. One thing I saw said there were fewer than 200,000 cases per year in the U.S. There's no known cure, but there are treatments to help manage the condition. During the police investigation, while the public was still trying to understand exactly what happened, a Wikipedia edit caused further confusion. On June 28, 2007, Wikimedia Foundation spokeswoman Sandra Ordonez confirmed to ABC that a Wikipedia user edited the Chris Benoit page and wrote that Nancy Benoit died before the police found the bodies. Chris Benoit's biography was edited at 12:01 a.m. on Monday, June 25th, but the police didn't enter the Benoit home until 2:30 p.m. The post said Chris Benoit was replaced by Johnny Nitro for the Extreme Championship Wrestling Championship match at Vengeance, as Benoit was not there due to personal issues stemming from the death of his wife, Nancy. So that's pretty interesting that somebody edited this Wikipedia page and said that Nancy was dead before police even got inside that house.
Yeah.
Now, it's also one of the problems with Wikipedia, right? Anybody can pretty much go in there and edit and do whatever they want. But you could see why a lot of people would think that's very strange.
Right.
According to Wiki News, within an hour of the post, the edit was changed and a comment added, "Need a reliable source." You see that quite a bit if you ever get on Wikipedia. It also said, saying that his wife died is a pretty big statement. You need to back it up with something. I agree. Another hour passed and then another edit was made adding, "according to several pro wrestling websites," to the end of the statement. Then the edit was changed 20 minutes later with another comment saying, "per several pro wrestling websites," is still not reliable information. Wikimedia Foundation learned about the posting and an employee left a message to Fayetteville police around 11 a.m. on June 26th. They gave them the IP address of the user. They also locked the Chris Benoit page to prevent further edits. Ordonez confirmed that they gave this information to the police and also that this individual's IP address had been flagged in the past for vandalizing other Wikipedia pages, specifically wrestling related. Early on the 29th, the user confessed in a posting on Wikinews. The confession matched the IP address that edited Chris Benoit's wiki page. The user said they were deeply sorry and the post was a terrible coincidence. But the user did not identify themselves in this apology post. They did say they were from Stamford, Connecticut, where WWE was founded, but they did not claim to be connected to WWE in any way. But obviously, Gibbs, the police are going to want to check into this.
Well, sure.
You're going to become concerned when someone, it seems, knows about a death or deaths before anyone else. So they attempted to track the IP address down. They traced the posting to this IP address in Connecticut. Local police went and they seized the computer from the user. They declined to name the person at the time, but they did say that if this person had knowledge of the murders before the police found the bodies, they could face criminal charges. Okay, you're not really going out on a limb there, but
No.
I get what they're saying. On June 28th, the police confirmed that federal drug agents and sheriff's officials conducted a raid of the office of Dr. Phil Aston to search for medical and prescription records. On July 2nd, Phil Aston was charged with improperly dispensing painkillers and other drugs. He was charged with 7 counts. The complaint stated that he wrote prescriptions for approximately 1 million doses of controlled substances over a 2-year period.
Wow.
That is a big, big number.
It is.
The DEA called these prescriptions excessive for a sole practitioner in a rural area. Aston pleaded not guilty. That would be excessive, it seems like, if you had a big, huge practice in downtown Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But if you're out in the middle of, rural Georgia,
Yeah.
police are going to think, okay, something really is going on here.
It was like his number got passed around a few times.
Phil Aston was put on house arrest under a $125,000 bond. CNN reported that Chris Benoit's name was not mentioned in the indictment, but according to the U.S. Attorney's Office, through prescription records for Mr. Benoit, maintained at a pharmacy in Fayetteville, Georgia, Dr. Aston was identified as prescribing, on average, a 10-month supply of anabolic steroids to Mr. Benoit every 3 to 4 weeks from May 4th, 2006 through May 9th, 2007.
Wow. So a 10-month supply every 3 or 4 weeks.
Basically every month.
Yeah. That's a lot of roids.
Yeah. So what do you make of that? Either he's taking much more than what the prescription calls for,
Right.
or those steroids are going to somebody else.
Yeah.
I think those are the two things that you can make from that. On July 3rd, Fayette County Prosecutor Scott Ballard stated in a news release that they reviewed some of Daniel Benoit's medical records and they don't mention any pre-existing mental or physical impairment. So this goes back to this whole Fragile X syndrome.
Right.
That, an attorney came out and claimed that he had. They didn't find it in any of his prior medical records. And we mentioned it, right? It was this WWE attorney, Jerry McDevitt, who had made the statements about this Fragile X syndrome. He also said that Chris and Nancy argued over whether he should stay home more to take care of Daniel. Prosecutor Scott Ballard said that investigators found needle marks on Daniel's arms. He was told Daniel's parents thought he was undersized and they were giving him growth hormone. I get it, a lot of kids are undersized, but man, at that age, it seems like a very powerful thing to give a 7-year-old.
It does. I do think in rare occasions they'll do that, but man.
Well, okay, they do that, but under maybe the supervision of a doctor.
Yeah.
But is that what we have here? Because it's not sounding to me like it is. It sounds to me as though Chris could get his hands on that and they were just thinking, okay,
Right.
we'll give him some and see what happens. Now, I don't know that to be the truth, but WWE spokesman Gary Davis said on July 3rd that McDevitt saw a Canadian news report implying Daniel had Fragile X syndrome, and he felt confident that this was accurate. After speaking with some employees who knew Chris Benoit, Gary Davis also said they had no information to contradict Scott Ballard's statement. So I don't know. These are some pretty big statements to come out and make when you haven't verified the fact, right? And this is an attorney. This isn't just a lay person. You would think there'd be a little more digging to make sure that this statement that you're putting out is correct. On July 17th, the press conference was held announcing the toxicology results from Chris, Nancy, and Daniel's autopsies. Nancy tested positive for Xanax, hydrocodone, and hydromorphone. But investigators couldn't test the exact levels at her time of death due to decomposition. Nancy's blood alcohol level was 0.184, but they couldn't tell if she had actually ingested any alcohol because they said this high blood alcohol content level could have been caused by decomposition.
Oh, well, makes it more difficult to really know what's going on.
It was also said that the drugs found in Nancy's body were at a, quote, therapeutic level, but could have been lower than they were when she died. Again, due to decomposition. So yeah, I guess it does make it tough from that respect, but I did kind of want to talk about some of these drugs. All right, Xanax. I think there are a lot of people that take Xanax and or a similar drug.
Sure.
Hydrocodone is prescribed, a lot for pain and different things.
Right.
Hydromorphone, I'm not exactly sure what that is.
Me neither.
Sounds powerful.
Yeah, maybe I want some.
Because to me, it sounds like morphine.
Yes.
And I've talked about morphine quite a bit as it relates to my kidney stones. I know how powerful that is.
You mean how much you enjoyed it?
And how much I enjoyed it. But I think, at the heart of it is the question. Did she take these drugs herself, prescribed, not prescribed, whatever, or were these drugs used to sedate her? Dr. Chris Sperry of the GBI said there was no evidence Nancy was sedated, but there was evidence that Daniel was. Fox News reported that Daniel had elevated levels of Xanax in his body. Dr. Sperry said, "It is our opinion that Daniel Benoit was sedated by Xanax at the time that he was murdered. So that means he was sedated prior to the time that he died." I just said a lot of people take Xanax or a drug similar to it. I know it's being prescribed to teenagers. I don't know how many 7-year-olds are taking Xanax on a regular basis.
Probably more than we realize.
Probably, because I don't know. I only know my kids weren't taking anything like that when they were that age. But I think that would have been an easy thing to figure out.
Yeah.
He's either got a prescription for that or not. And my thought is he probably did.
Probably did not. Yeah.
The medical examiner was unable to test levels of human growth hormone in Daniel's body because of a lack of urine. Fox News reported that Chris Benoit had Xanax and hydrocodone at therapeutic levels in his body, but tested negative for blood alcohol. Testosterone was found at elevated levels in his body, which most likely meant he was taking it before he died. Dr. Chris Berry said, "This level of testosterone indicates that he had been using testosterone at least within some reasonably short period of time prior to the time that he died." Although testosterone was found in Chris Benoit's urine, there is no evidence of any other of the illegal types of steroids or the whole laundry list of anabolic steroids that are out there to be used. The presence of the testosterone alone even could be an indicator that he was being treated for testicular insufficiency.
Oh, there's a big word.
And does that mean small grapes? I don't
know.
They're insufficient. Were they made insufficient because of steroid use?
Absolutely. That could have happened.
Could have
Yeah.
been. We don't know. The toxicology report revealed that despite passing the WWE wellness checks, Chris Benoit was taking testosterone. Dr. Sperry also said there is no reliable scientific data that conclusively says that elevated levels of administered testosterone lead to excessive rage or behavioral disorders. All the testing that's been done regarding that has been completely inconclusive. So I think we got to break this down.
Yeah, I think we do.
So we've got testosterone for sure, but you have this doctor saying that the toxicology report doesn't show evidence of these illegal types of steroids, these anabolic steroids that, we commonly kind of associate with this roid rage syndrome. So I think when all of this came out, it kind of led to the question. If Chris Benoit didn't kill his family because of roid rage, why'd he do it?
Yeah. What was the driving force?
Because let's not forget, at this point, their working theory is that Chris Benoit killed Nancy and Daniel, and then he hanged himself. Christopher Nowinski, a neuroscientist and former pro wrestler who worked with Chris, speculated that repeated concussions could have caused his actions. According to the New York Times, Nowinski said he was one of the only guys who would take a chair shot to the back of the head, which is stupid. Nowinski himself had to retire from wrestling because of concussions. So this kind of goes back to our discussion in episode 1 about, how fake is it? We know it's scripted, but we also know that these guys take a tremendous amount of abuse.
They sure do.
To their body.
Yeah, in the name of entertainment.
Yeah. So if you're getting hit, and I mean hit, really hit, with a chair in the back of the head, this guy is calling it stupid because I think it's pretty well proven that falling backwards or hitting the back of your head goes a long way towards kind of causing a lot of these concussions. Right. I think a lot of people get them that way. According to Chris Jericho on the Dark Side of the Ring, he said it was a badge of honor to take a chair shot to the head in the 1990s. But if you had a concussion in wrestling, you just shook it off. Shake it off. Go in there and do it. All of us did it. And this is something that you hear about in a lot of different sports. Football was the same way. They didn't know back then everything they know today about concussions. There really was no concussion protocol.
No.
It was man up and get back out there regardless of what you're experiencing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of football players, any sport, that was kind of the mentality. I have to man up. If I can't do it, I'm letting my team down. I'm going to be seen as weak. And it was a decision made that was very detrimental to many people.
But also you have that other driving factor that if I don't do it, someone's going to come in that will do it.
And maybe they might play better than me or they're better than me.
Right.
And then I lose my spot. Yeah, that's a good point as well. Now, obviously today, especially in the NFL, they have this protocol that kind of takes it out of the player's hand, which it really is the way that it should be. A player is always going to want to go back in if they think they physically can do it. And a lot of times, even if they don't think, they're going to want to do it. Once the temps start rising, I realized I was back in the same worn out rotation, same tank, same shorts, same everything. So I gave my daily uniform an upgrade with Quince. Their pieces are easy, elevated, and somehow make me feel more put together without even trying. Like their 100% European linen shorts and dresses from $30. Luxe swimwear, Italian leather platform sandals, and so much more. The best part, everything with Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than what you'd find at similar brands. By working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middleman, Quince gives you luxury without the markup. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. I'm getting ready to stock up on shorts for summer from Quince, and I know they're going to be amazing because everything I've ordered has been of the highest quality, and the prices are amazing. Treat your closet to a little summer glow up with Quince. Go to quince.com/TCAT for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/TCATT to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/TCAT. My wife and I do a lot of shopping online, and we always use Rakuten. Rakuten is the smartest way to save money when you shop because you earn cash back at over 3,500 stores. We're talking fashion, beauty, electronics, home essentials, travel, dining, concert tickets, and more. Your favorite stores like Macy's, Nike, Sephora, Dyson, and Lowe's. And that's just to name a few. Pay Rakuten to send them shoppers, and Rakuten then passes passes on a part of that payment to its members as cashback. Cashback is deposited directly into your PayPal account, or Rakuten can send you a check. You can even maximize your savings by stacking cash back on top of other deals, like store sales and coupons. You're already shopping at your favorite stores. Why not save while you're doing it? It really is a no-brainer. Membership is free, and it's easy to sign up. Get the Rakuten app now and join the 17 million members who are already saving. Cashback rates change daily. See Rakuten.com for details. That's Rakuten. Your cashback really adds up. Nowinski wrote Head Games, Football's Concussion Crisis in 2006 about chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which can cause memory loss, depression, and paranoid behavior. He told Dark Side of the Ring that about 6 months before the murders, he spoke with Chris in the locker room. Chris asked him about his book on concussions. He asked how many concussions Nowinski had before he was forced to retire. Nowinski asked him how many he had, and Chris answered, "I've had more than I can count." And I'm not so sure, Gibbs, that you wouldn't have heard that from many athletes
prior to all the
what's going on today.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. There's definitely many of them out there that have multiple concussions
that were unknown, because I think the big thing was a lot of athletes didn't tell people that they were suffering those types of symptoms that a doctor would have then called a concussion, because they didn't want to have somebody tell them they couldn't play or whatever it was. They just wouldn't talk about it.
Or if you did tell your coach or somebody, they just tell you, get back out that field.
That's true. Chris Nowinski contacted Michael Benoit on June 28th about studying Chris's brain. He suggested having Chris's brain tested for CTE. According to Nowinski, they got Chris's brain in early July. Within a month, they knew Chris tested positive for CTE. And Chris's family was desperate to understand, why this happened. So they turned over part of Chris's brain to Dr. Julian Bales of the Sports Legacy Institute. Bales is the head of neurosurgery at the West Virginia University School of Medicine and the former team physician of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
So then he's really familiar with this stuff.
Yeah, he's also the founder of the Brain Injury Research Institute. He and his colleague, Dr. Bennett Amalu, studied Chris's brain sample. Dr. Amalu had studied athletes' brains before Chris Benoit. One of them was football player Mike Webster. Amalu studied Mike Webster's brain and discovered the disease, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is caused by repeated head trauma. On September 5th, 2007, experts with the Sports Legacy Institute held a press conference to discuss their test results and explain that Chris Benoit suffered from CTE. His brain showed a buildup of tau protein deposits, which trigger the release of phosphorus, which essentially kills brain cells. That can't be good.
No.
But according to ESPN, the researcher said there was no evidence that steroid use causes these protein deposits. Dr. Bales said, "Are massive doses of steroids good? No, but there is no evidence presently that steroids cause brain cells to die." So they know that he had CTE. They know that he had this built up of this protein, which killed brain cells.
Right.
What they don't know, apparently, according to this doctor, is whether it's caused by this prolonged steroid use or not. Testing found that Chris had such severe brain damage that it was said his brain resembled an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient.
Wow. That's saying something right there.
At his age.
Yeah.
It is saying a lot. And you and I have both dealt with family members who have suffered from this type of disease, and we know how debilitating it is, how tough it is on them, but also on the other family members.
Oh, very tough.
They compared Chris's brain to a healthy brain. Chris's brain showed advanced dementia in the form of brown clumps or tangles, which basically are brain cells that died from head trauma. It was said that Chris Benoit had brain damage in every section of his brain, including the areas that control emotions or emotional behaviors.
That's really scary when you think about that.
Well, I think it's giving you the magnitude of the type of brain damage that this guy had. And it was said this brain damage was caused by repeated concussions and head trauma from wrestling. We mentioned it, right? He had said to people that he had more concussions than he could even count. He also had similar brain damage to NFL players with severe concussions who later became depressed and hurt themselves or others. And I kind of alluded to this in episode 1. This is what we're starting to see more and more of.
Yeah.
And, it gets reported on because these are big time athletes. They're famous. So when one of these big time athletes does something, either to someone else or to themselves, it gets more attention than it would be if the person was not famous. The person that comes to my mind right off the bat is Junior Seau, an unbelievable football player.
Sure.
One of the best linebackers to ever play the game. He hurt himself.
Yeah.
And it was later found that he had this CTE and he had this type of severe brain damage from repeated concussions. So we've been talking about this condition, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE. It's still being researched by doctors today. Back in the 1920s, physicians began noticing that professional boxers had this thing that back then they called punch drunk syndrome. But the symptoms were very similar to what today is called chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
Talking about some potential head damage.
Boxing,
yeah.
Yeah. You're getting hit on the head quite a bit. Yeah, you think about someone like Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
And the things that he, endured later in his life. I think most people attributed a lot of that to, the number of punches that he took. He was kind of almost famous for letting people hit him to tire them out.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he would have this burst of energy and he would, they'd be tired. He'd come back and finish them off.
Who else said that? Rocky.
Sylvester Stallone.
Rocky Balboa.
Yeah, the only difference is one was real and one was a movie.
Oh, Muhammad Ali was a movie?
Yeah. ABC reported that Bales said that he couldn't be certain that brain damage caused the tragedy, but he said it most likely was a leading cause. We think these changes are not due to steroids. That has never really been studied, but it's never been in the medical literature or any research that shows steroids do this to the brain. These changes in the brain were found in the 1920s before steroids were even invented. So again, this is kind of at the crux of this, what caused it to happen question.
Yeah.
The CTE is there. That part is factual. It's a scientific
Can't deny it.
thing, but what caused it? And what they're saying is we can't prove that the steroid use had anything to do with causing this tragedy, but repeated concussions and all that can cause this CTE, which can cause changes in the brain.
Right.
In October 2007, court papers filed in the case against Dr. Aston showed that prosecutors said that he prescribed Chris Benoit more than the normal amount of testosterone needed for his hormone disorder. Over a year-long period, Aston wrote him 7 prescriptions. If the total amount of medication was broken down by each month, it exceeded FDA guidelines by 50%.
Yeah, that's a problem. There's a reason why they set those guidelines.
In February 2008, Fayette County investigators released details from their police report. WSB-TV reported that they did not believe anyone else was in the home besides Chris, Nancy, and Daniel, but they still didn't have an exact motive. The report said, after careful examination of all evidence collected by investigators, the Fayetteville County Sheriff's Office concludes that between Friday, June 22nd, 2007, and Sunday, June 24th, 2007, Chris Benoit took the lives of his wife, Nancy, and their son, Daniel, before ending his own life. Right, we already knew this, right? This was kind of the prevailing theory pretty much from the get-go. Now they're coming out and saying, okay, this is what the official police report reads.
Right.
But they don't have the motive. What's the motive? According to ProWrestling.net, Chris and Nancy's marriage was falling apart in the weeks leading up to the murder, suicide. Chris was worried that Nancy was going to leave him. Nancy was angry with Chris for his steroid use. On May 9th, 2007, she texted Chris, "I will not accept this steroid-induced roller coaster ride of emotional abuse. Ignoring the problem or running away isn't going to help you face it. You need professional help, and only if you're fully honest about all of it." In a second text, she wrote, "Get off the stuff. I'm probably not the only one who can see, and we both know the wellness program is a joke."
Well, she's being right to the point, huh?
So in this first text, she mentions emotional abuse.
Right.
In episode 1, we detailed out some physical abuse.
Both very bad.
They both can be extremely, extremely harmful, damaging, nasty. But also, she's coming right out and saying it. You just said, steroids are causing you to act this way. Get off of them. Nancy told a neighbor she was afraid to go home. After Chris slammed her against the wall, she was angry that Chris was using steroids and one time threw them out. So she's worried about these drugs he's taking. She's worried about, how it's affecting his behavior. And number one, because she's experiencing the effects
right
firsthand.
Yeah.
Emotionally, physically, but also she told people that she felt like he was becoming distant from her and his children.
I mean, he definitely had an addiction to these roids, the volume he was taking, or the volume he was being prescribed. And obviously it seemed as if he was taking them, leads you to believe that there was some addiction.
Yeah. And I think, can addiction take many forms? Right? Can you physically get addicted to substances? Absolutely.
Yeah.
People do it all the time. I've made no secret that I'm addicted to caffeine.
Yeah.
If I don't have my 6 cups of coffee in the morning, I am not a nice person to be around.
But if your wife asked you to get off the caffeine or you're going to lose this family, I sit here and say, well, wouldn't you just get off of it? It's easy as that, right? Shut the machine down. Throw out all that coffee stuff over there and get back on track. But it's an addiction.
Right.
It's just not that simple.
It's not. It's not so cut and dry. It's not for people who, struggle with addiction. And I'm not making light of addiction by saying I'm addicted to coffee, but I am addicted to coffee.
Yeah.
Caffeine.
And it seemed like she really wasn't too keen on the workplace wellness program, as if it was, that's not how you're going to do it. You just need to get off it because that program's not going to work.
No, she called it a joke. Obviously, he was getting around it, as I'm sure most of the other wrestlers probably were as well.
Well, of course, yeah.
It's kind of like the Olympics testing that we found out so much about over the years. People were getting away with all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Or the Tour de France testing, or you name it testing.
There's no difference than the drug testing here at the studio.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very strict program, but somehow you keep finding a way around it.
I know.
On January 29th, 2009, Dr. Phil Aston pleaded guilty to 75 counts against him. 75 counts.
That's a huge amount of counts to get somebody. It just tells you how often he was doing this illegal activity.
Yeah, and my thought is they pile them up, right? They're gonna put as many counts against you as they can, because can you get out of 1 or 2 counts? Maybe. You're not getting out of 175 counts.
Yeah,
it's gonna be really, really tough. They're gonna get you on something.
Something's gonna stick.
He admitted to illegally prescribing drugs. His plea referenced 19 patients that he saw and prescribed hundreds of illegal prescriptions to. Dr. Aston prescribed Chris Benoit anabolic steroids, but a medical examiner couldn't say for certain if the steroids led to the murders. Again, we keep coming back to this question. Aston's defense attorney said that his patients from the indictment were a very small subset, and there were many people around the area where he lived and practiced that were grateful to him for their care. In May 2009, Phil Aston was sentenced to 10 years in prison. So 10 years is no joke for scribbling on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously what he was doing was wrong. He shouldn't have been doing it. And I get it. I'm sure he was a good doctor to many, but that's a tough argument to make. Please look past all of this stuff I did and just take into account the fact that, well, I was really good with these patients.
Right, yeah.
In January 2020, Chris's son, David Benoit, spoke about his father's death with Chris Van Vliet in an interview saying, it wasn't him, man. It definitely wasn't. He would never do that. I know he wouldn't. I think something terribly went wrong. The doctor said he had CTE. That's what, at the beginning, gave me some closure. It just made my life a little easier. I didn't have to think about it. He had CTE. I don't think it was him. So this is an interesting statement because at first, when I read this, I thought he was saying, my dad didn't do it.
Right.
It was somebody else. But when you look at the context, it really seems more as though he's saying, my dad wasn't himself.
Yeah.
Because of the CTE.
Yeah, and how sad is that, to think back about who your dad was and who he was during this time, knowing that, man, that just wasn't my dad. That's somebody different.
And he even said it. That gave him some closure. It made his life easier. I think I would have to kind of lean on that too if I was in his position. Here's this man that you've known your whole life. He helped raise you. He was this father figure. And at one point, or maybe during the whole time, you knew him as this guy.
Right.
And you loved this guy. And then all of a sudden, this horrific tragedy occurs, and somehow you've got to separate it out in your mind.
Yeah.
You've got to compartmentalize, and using the CTE, I think helped him, is what he's saying. David was just a teenager when his father died. He was living in Edmonton, Canada with his mom. Obviously, he was in disbelief when he received the news, so much so that apparently he punched a police officer. David said, I didn't believe it for days, bro. I think the day it really hit me was his funeral. That was a hard day. That was a super hard day. The last time he spoke to his dad was on Father's Day 2007. So Father's Day's in June, right? What, a couple of weeks?
Yeah.
Less than a couple of weeks before this tragedy happened. He said, we were just laughing and getting ready to make plans for the summer. I got to say I love you one last time to him. It feels good to get it off my chest. It feels good. I've never spoken about it. So it's a long time to never publicly speak about this tragedy. And I think it would be cathartic in some sense to kind of get some things off your chest. And he's kind of backing that up. Chris Jericho said on the Dark Side of the Ring, I think his fate was sealed the day that Eddie died. Obviously, he's talking about Chris here. Whether he knew it or not, whatever it was he was going through, I think he just continued to shrink his whole world until all that was left was just whatever was in his head that caused him to snap. Sandra Toffaloni also said it's not just one thing. I think that it's a factor of alcohol and drugs, and yes, possibly CTE and stress and grief, and all of those things rolled together and put him on a path that weekend that he couldn't get off. So we spent quite a bit of time in episode 1 talking about the death of Eddie Guerrero and it seemingly, having this just massively negative effect on Chris Benoit. it's almost as if that's what caused this spiral, according to some. So you have Nancy's sister saying, I don't think it's just one thing. I think, you have to look at all these things and kind of put them together. And even Chris Jericho really going back to the day that Eddie died is kind of the crux or whatever, the tipping point,
right?
For lack of a better term. But over 10 years later, there's still a ton of questions that remain in the Benoit family tragedy. This case has been referenced as a warning to other athletes about the importance of safety and the dangers of repeated head injuries. Obviously, it is a good warning because, according to many, this CTE could have or most likely played a major role in, the actions that he took. What you don't have is a lot of these people who are involved saying, well, I don't think he did it. But there are people, and I think it's something that we have to acknowledge. There are people who believe that Chris Benoit didn't murder his family.
Yeah.
And that he didn't take his own life. Now, I'm not going to go into detail with all the different theories, but obviously it would involve at least one or multiple people setting the stage or setting it up
to
look as though he did.
Right.
One of the things as we wrapped up this case that I found very interesting was, really the talk about the connection between steroids and CTE. And it seems as though that connection just has not been made, or at least the connection that steroids and what we have always termed roid rage is what caused him possibly to do what he did. The authorities are leaning more towards the CTE.
Yeah.
And I think, could it be a combination like Sandra talked about? I think it absolutely could. If he was drinking, if he was doing some drugs, if he was, not able to really battle through this grief that he had over Eddie Guerrero's death, and then the CTE and the steroid use on top of it.
Yeah.
Could it have all kind of snowballed into what ultimately happened? I think that's a possibility.
Sure. Could have sent him over the edge.
But also when you talk about this CTE eating away brain cells or eating away parts of the brain that kind of regulate emotions and things like that. Wow. That's very, very troubling.
Yeah.
And I think could lead some people to do certain things that had they not had the CTE, they would have never done.
Right.
I did talk about Junior Seau a little bit, and, teammates love this guy. And obviously fans did too. He was a great football player, but on top of that, he was always seen as kind of this bubbly, larger than life personality.
He sure was.
And then all of a sudden, something seemed as though it changed. And, it's thought that this CTE had something to do with it. And I go back to the conversation you and I had in episode 1 about a lot of parents making the decision that, no, we just don't want our kids to play football.
Yeah.
And I get that. Everything in life is a balance of risk and reward. There's a lot of rewarding things that come from playing team sports, football, baseball, basketball, whatever it is, soccer. Are there risks involved in some of that? Yeah. Are there more risks in football than there are in basketball? Sure.
Yeah.
Or boxing. Is that a risky proposition? Is MMA risky? Yeah.
Yeah, they're all contact sports.
Yep. But I also hate the thought of kids not playing some type of organized sports. You and I grew up in all of that. And man, there's just so much to be learned.
There is.
By being on a team and having to rely on others and also have them rely on you doing your job.
Yeah.
And learning how to communicate and work together and just all of that stuff.
Good old teamwork.
When I boil it down, Gibbs, it's hard for me not to think that it went down the way that police said it did.
Yeah.
When you kind of boil down the text messages and some of those things that we talked about in this episode. What I do struggle with in some respect is the motive.
Right.
Because yes, if Nancy was planning on leaving him, would that be a motive? Could be. Other than that, I don't know what it would have been.
Just raw anger, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. But that's it for our episode on Chris Benoit. We got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Yeah, let's hear them.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Ainsley from Glasgow, Scotland. I have been a fan since lockdown, so 2020. Just listened to an episode on Chris Benoit. As a lifelong wrestling fan, you guys did an amazing job. I think I was 14 when it happened, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I mean, it rocked the wrestling community. I'm really looking forward to part 2. A case I think you guys should cover if you haven't already, because it may be before I was listening. Bible John, which took place in Glasgow, Scotland. I would recommend that. It's unsolved, so maybe not for true crime all the time, but there you go. Anyway, goodbye.
So appreciate the voicemail so much. You know, me, Gibbs, I'm a sucker for a Scottish accent.
I know you are.
With my last name being Ferguson. Scottish. And appreciate the kudos on the episode 1.
Right.
What I will say is we did cover Bible John.
We did.
But it is on Unsolved. I don't know the episode number off the top of my head, but
It was fairly recent.
it's not been that long ago.
No.
Hi guys, this is Amanda. I'm from Brooklyn. I'm a long-time podcast listener, but this is the first time I've ever called in. I just listened to the Chris Benoit episode, part 1. Gotta say, I think it's the best episode you guys have ever put out. The way you told the story was phenomenal, and oh god, it's so tragic, but you guys did such a good job, and I just so can't wait for next week for part 2. But I'm also calling because I don't even watch wrestling, and I was practically screaming when you couldn't figure out the names for the villain and the good guy. It's the heel versus the face. Like, the face is a baby face, the nice guy, and the heel is the villain, the bad guy. And I'm an older millennial, so you guys, I never really feel like you're dating yourselves, but when you couldn't think of the name for the real world, I was cracking up. At least giving you that that's where the news came from, but it's the real world. Anyways, you guys are both great. Love the dynamics, love the podcast, and keep your own time ticking. Bye.
Hey, I thought you were from Brooklyn. Those like you have a Brooklyn accent.
So I think the real world, I don't remember when that came out.
Yeah.
But I think I was either in college or it came out after I was out of college. It was at a period of time where I was not watching stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I never watched it.
Yeah.
But the heel is what I was trying to think of,
Okay.
but couldn't think of the thing. Face, I've never heard that term.
Me neither.
All right. You got a baby face, so you're the good guy.
Yeah.
So face and heel. Okay. Love it.
Face and heel.
Love it.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. This is Mikey K from Wisconsin. Calling in regards to you covering the Chris Benoit case. First off, part 1 was amazing. You had spoken about good guy versus bad guy. The terminology that most of them use is face and heel. Face is short for baby face, which would be the good guy, kind of like that old slang for the heroes. And then heels, who are the villains. That term heel comes from an early 1900s slang, which means a contemptible person or someone who is not quite liked. So just a quick little fact to throw at you there. Face and heel would be your good guys and your bad guys. Again, love the podcast. Keep your own time ticking, you guys.
So who's the face and heel here?
Well, you're the face
Oh, okay.
and I'm the heel.
Oh, okay.
That's how this podcast is set up.
Oh, yeah. I should know that.
That's why all the love comes your way.
Is that why?
You also have a baby face. So no, but just, more kind of backing that up. The interesting thing that you and I always run into is if we had time to sit around and think about it,
Yeah.
we would probably come up with it. But, when you're riffing, when you're talking off the cuff, there's just some things that just don't come, that just don't enter your mind
Especially with me.
quick enough
Yeah.
to keep going with the podcast. So, and then also over the years, we kind of want to leave a little bit of room for people to call in and tell us the answer.
Yeah, exactly.
I could look it up.
You could.
I could stop the podcast. I'm sitting in front of a laptop,
Right.
But that kind of defeats the whole purpose of you and I and the way we do it.
I'm normally right.
99.9% of the time.
Yeah, I'm always
You think
right.
you're right.
Yeah, exactly.
But we appreciate the voicemails. We had a couple of things in the mailbag. Mike and Carly Weeks sent us in some jerky.
Yeah.
Looks really good. Carrie from Colorado sent us some bison jerky, but also sent each of us a really cool cutting board.
Yeah, really appreciate that.
And in the note, she made sure that I let you pick the one you want.
Yeah.
So I'm putting that out there.
All right.
Whether I do or not, nobody will know.
No.
But we appreciate everything that people send in. All right, buddy, that's it for another episode of True Crime All the Time. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
In the early hours of December 4th, 2024, CEO Brian Thompson stepped out onto the streets of Midtown Manhattan.
This assailant pulls out a weapon and starts firing at him.
We're talking about the CEO of the biggest private health insurance corporation in the world.
And the suspect,
he has been identified as Luigi Nicholas Mangione,
became one of the most divisive figures in modern criminal history.
It was targeted, premeditated, and meant to sow terror.
I'm Jesse Weber, host of Luigi, produced by Law and Crime and Twist. This is more than a true crime investigation. We explore a uniquely American moment that could change the country forever.
He's awoken the people to a true issue.
Finally, maybe this would lead rich and powerful people to acknowledge the barbaric nature of our healthcare system.
Listen to Law and Crime's Luigi exclusively on Wondery Plus. You can join Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts.